The Torah portion is Parshas Vayera, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe has a interesting question that he asks on this parsha. And this article of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, it's called the Sicha, is trying to answer this, discuss and develop a thought to answer this question. So what is this question? The question is that the book of Genesis is called Sefer HaYashar. Sefer HaYashar means the book of the upright, the book of the upright. And the reason why it's called the book of the upright is because it's about Avrohom, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And these are the upright people. So the book of Genesis was given that name of the book of the upright, Sefer HaYashar. And it's a statement in the Talmud that it's called Sefer HaYashar. So it is a valid description. That's it's sourced. It has good sources. It's in the Talmud, and so that is a valid name for the book of Genesis. Now, if you divide up the portions of Genesis, you will see that some of them talk about Avrohom, some talk about Yitzchak, and some talk about Yaakov. They're divided up. For example, Lech Lecha and Vayera are completely about Avrohom. Noach, at the end of the parsha, it just touches that Avrohom is born, and hardly says much about Avrohom. And Chayesara is also a little about Avrohom, but it has a major element of Yitzchak in Chayesara. So if you look at the Torah portions, you see that the two portions that are Avroham's portions are Lech Lecha and Vayera. So the question the Lubavitcher Rebbe asks is, why are they divided up? If it's all about Avrohom, let it all be in one parsha. Why should it be divided up into two? So the fact that it's divided up into two means that there is two types of the way Avrohom served Hashem. So we have the way he served Hashem, which is expressed in Parshas, in the portion of Lech Lecha, in the previous portion. And we have the way he served Hashem as is expressed in the portion of Vayera. So the question is, what does that mean? He served Hashem differently? He's really, he's one person, one and the same. And so how can we say that there's a major difference between the portion of Lech Lecha, previous portion, and the portion of Vayera that we're going to read this week? It's the same Abraham. We don't find much of a difference between last week and this week. He didn't change overnight. So what is
Smith,
this?
You're getting background noise.
The same like this morning?
No, this is, you've got a few people that are not muted.
Okay. I should mention, David, that if the same noise comes like this morning, I have a second camera that I can switch with. It's not as clear, the camera, but I think the noise doesn't. I think the noise came from that camera for some reason. I don't know. But anyway,
I don't know. I didn't hear any noise.
Right, this morning.
No, now I'm not hearing. So.
Oh, okay. Well, David has a very sensitive computer. So anyway, if you do hear the noise from the morning, please tell me.
I did not hear the noise either. Right now, I mean.
Okay, great. Okay.
The noise from this morning sounded like those toy chattering teeth that they sell in the toy stores, where the teeth are chit 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 chit, like it's chattering, like it sounded like chattering, but it was going on and off. It would be on for like 2 or 3 minutes, even if everybody was muted except for you. So it was coming someplace from your room or whatever. I don't know.
Anyway, you'll tell me if it comes back.
Okay.
So we're going to mute everyone now.
I had that same.
Okay. I think everyone's muted now. So again, we're talking about the portion of Lech Lecha and Vayera. This week is Vayera. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe asks, why is it divided into two if we're talking about Avrohom? And that's what this is, we're trying to learn from Avrohom. It should be one portion. Why is it divided into two portions? Now, of course, some of you may want to answer, well, it would be too long to read in the synagogue, and therefore they had to divide it up. But that's the synagogue, reading in the synagogue is not a reason for Hashem to have to divide the whole portion. In other words, there must be something intrinsic about it that is causing there to be two portions. It's not just some side reason. It's divine providence, that there has to be something in it that is causing, that is the reason why Hashem divided these into two portions. Yes, Yehuda.
Yeah, well, if what you're saying is true, then why would they double the portions when there's not a leap year?
Right. In other words, you can't really say that it's too long, because we have double portions. Right. That's another good reason. But in any event, so there must be something intrinsic about these two portions that are causing them to be divided into two. And the idea is that, the fact that it's divided into two in our tradition, even though in the Torah itself it doesn't clearly divide. I mean, there are sources in Talmud and in places in Zohar. It says Gan Sidrei Oraisa. There are 53 portions, so it definitely is divided, in this way. And it's also the custom, the tradition that we read this portion, 1 week, and we read the other portion the next week. So there must be something about it, about this that's causing it to be divided, and even though it's all about Avrohom. So we said that it must be that he's dividing the way he served Hashem is different in Lech Lecha and from the way he served Hashem in Vayera. And because of that, we're going to divide the portions up into these two portions. Now, the Lubavitcher Rebbe adds that the fact that the name of the portion is supposed to express what's in the portion, just like if you read a book, the title of the book should be explaining what should be a good title that it describes what the book is about. So the title of the portions should be describing that difference between why Lech Lecha is this way of serving Hashem, and Vayera is a different way of serving Hashem, how Avrohom served Hashem. And, one of the things I always think of when we talk about Avrohom, Yitzchak, and Yaakov is that we have to take ourselves out of the mode that we live in, and we have to imagine what was Avrohom studying all day the Talmud. We picture him like a big rabbi with a long beard and busy carrying having a huge library, and that's how you picture some great. But in a certain sense, we have to think of Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov the way they served Hashem. Their uniqueness was not that they were, of course, they were very knowledgeable, and according to the common view is that Avrohom wrote the Sefer Yetzirah. He wrote the book of Yetzirah formation, which is like a Kabbalistic book. Of course, he was quite knowledgeable. But what we're talking about is the way he served God. And a lot of people don't talk about that anymore. Many people nowadays, they think of, especially in the big yeshivas, they talk about becoming a scholar. People want to become scholars, Talmud Chachams. But really, it's not about being a scholar. It's about serving Hashem. And that's, and becoming, like, for example, what we're learning in the Tanya in the morning about becoming a tzaddik, a holy, a righteous person, which we know Avrohom, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, of course, were in the level of the league of tzaddikim, righteous. I mean, that is, the serving Hashem. Being a scholar is, it's nice that you're fulfilling the mitzvah of studying Torah. It's a great thing. Study Torah is the highest level of connection with Hashem, but we have to step back a little. We have to think about serving Hashem, that Avrohom served Hashem. He was, in a certain level of serving Hashem, and it was different the way he served Hashem in Lech Lecha and the way he served Hashem in Vayera. And the names of the parshas are going to express that as well. So what is the main difference when you look at the parshas? What do you see? And the truth is, we touched upon this last week, that the difference between Lech Lecha and Vayera is Lech Lecha is all about Avrohom serving Hashem before he was circumcised. So Avrohom served Hashem in a tremendous way. He followed everything Hashem told him. He even followed things that, he followed everything that he knew about from Torah. It says Avram kept all the laws, even though they weren't given yet at Sinai. They weren't an obligation yet. So Avraham followed all the laws of the Torah, but at the same time, he did not do his circumcision until the end of Lech Lecha, the end of the last week's Torah portion. He circumcised himself after Hashem commanded him to, and that circumcision is what really leads us into Vayera, because Vayera picks up on the third day of the circumcision. So the last week we ended with Avraham being circumcised. And this week we start from Abraham's third day of the circumcision, and God appears to him and he wants to visit him, and Abraham is looking for guests because he wants to invite guests into his home. And it's on the third day of his circumcision that Vayera begins. And so the simple difference between last week's Torah portion and this week's Torah portion is that last week was when Avraham was a Arel, an uncircumcised individual. And this week is when Avraham is already, there's pre-Mila and post-Mila. And last week is the Torah portion of pre-Mila Avraham. And this week is the portion of post-Mila Avraham. Avraham is in a whole different league than he was last week.
Rabbi Smith?
Yes.
So I remember you had given a description of you had mentioned a stirring, a physical stirring in this world that causes a spiritual stirring in Shemayim. And one of the reasons I think, just listening and thinking about this, of why the portions would be split like that, would be the Lech Lecha leaves us at the physical stirring in this world, which causes the visitation of the Malachim in Vayera. And that puts it on a newer level. That puts us on a level where Shemayim actually is accepting the commitment on the part of Avraham to, when he dedicates his whole self, risks his life for the circumcision, and puts it on a new level. So when it's accepted, it becomes part of the new parsha.
I'm hearing what you're saying. It sounds all correct. I'm not. The truth is, if you could just summarize what your main what is the main point that you're saying?
Up to the point of Lech Lecha, Avrohom, I think, is more like Noah, where he's following the directions. He's doing this. He's doing that. But there's the commitment is put when he finally decides to make a commitment physically. In this, and there's a Kabbalistic, but with the level of existence, is it a Sarah? So he does the stirring in this world, and it causes a corresponding stirring in the spiritual realm and an acceptance that he's now at a new level, and that's Vayera.
Right.
That's when he's visited by the three angels, and that Hashem takes him in as a partner of creation when he has a discussion of, well, what shall I keep from Abraham, what I'm going to do in the cities of the plain. So on the way there, he discusses what he wants and Hashem allows himself actually to be co-opted by the negotiations that Abraham attempts. Right, which is a very good point. You're really hot with your discussion, your description of Vayera, and it's definitely along those lines. This concept. So Yasher Koyach, yeah, good points, and definitely worth connecting some of those points with what we're going to talk about and see if they all fit in. So the first thing that the Lubavitcher Rebbe brings about this discussion is something from the Zohar, because the Zohar says that before the Milah, the verse says Avrohom had a vision where Hashem appeared to him, and Hashem promised him about Israel and about children and so on, and it uses the term Mahaze, a vision. And the term Mahaze, even though it's in the Chumash, is an Aramaic word. And the common word would be Re'iyah or Vayera, which means to see. And Mahaze is a vision, but it's not the common word in Hebrew. And so the Zohar says that until Avrohom had his circumcision, the level of his prophecy was in the level of the word of Hashem was to Avrohom the Mahaze in a vision. But after his circumcision, it says Vayera Elav Hashem. So it seems like this statement of the Zohar is trying to answer this question of the difference between the portion before and this portion, because the Zohar sort of like divides Avroham's spiritual level from before he was circumcised and after he was circumcised, as if the circumcision made a major change in him. In other words, what it's really saying is, don't think that you did a mitzvah today, you put tefillin on, you lit Shabbos candles Friday. You think of yourself, I'm the same person, I just did a mitzvah, but I didn't change. And here, what the Zohar is saying, when he did that circumcision, his whole essence changed because his level of prophecy changed. He now became in a whole different league. He's in the league of Vayera Elav Hashem, that Hashem appears to him. Now, of course, that deserves to be expounded upon, because before it also said Hashem appeared to him. It just used an Aramaic word, Mahaze. But here, Hashem is appearing to him. So we'll be discussing that. But I see, Ben, you have a question. Yes, Ben.
Yeah, I wanted to say he Mahaze is two things. It's like you say a vision or a theater show. The shows they show in the theaters are also called Mahaze.
Right. Well, the Zohar takes this verse, and this word, I should say, Mahaze, and it emphasizes that this is key. This is a key word here, and I don't know if it would seem that I guess we could look up a search of how often, where else does it say in the Torah Mahaze, and when all the other prophets got their visions, what's the term that's used? But on a simple level, if we don't look into it, we have the Zohars telling us that this is key. There's the term Mahaze in Lech Lecha in last week's parsha, and a term Vayera in this week's parsha. And Mahaze is before, is pre-Mila, and Vayera is post-Mila. And the idea is, actually we spoke about this in the morning class a few days ago, that the angels don't understand Aramaic, and the reason why Hashem appeared to Avrohom in the term Mahaze is with that level of vision, is so that the angels will not have a jealousy or a complaint to Hashem that why is Hashem appearing to someone who is not circumcised. Now, after he had his circumcision, then it seems like they can't have any complaints, and therefore Hashem appears to Avrohom in a way of Vayera, and which is somehow a higher level. So what we're saying is there's two levels. There's the level pre-Mila and post-Mila, and that's expressed in the level of his prophecy. And the reason why do we see that in the word used for prophecy? Because the word used for prophecy in the previous portion emphasizes the fact that the angels will be jealous, and therefore Avrohom needs to have a lower level of prophecy, which is a type of prophecy that the angels can't really see or hear and understand. And after his circumcision, the angels can have no complaints. Yes, Yehuda.
Yeah. I don't understand why the angels would be jealous of Avraham. They're not circumcised.
You were cutting up. You started saying you don't know why they would be jealous.
They're not circumcised.
Well, that's the idea, that Hashem doesn't reveal himself to them, and yet he's revealing himself to Avrohom.
Ah, okay.
And that's why they're going to complain. And so because of that, Hashem gives him this revelation where they don't have they can't understand, they don't see it because it's Aramaic, so to speak. It's a different language. Mm-hmm. And this idea is actually spoken about in the Talmud, that if a person is allowed to daven in a different language, especially Aramaic, and the Talmud talks about if possibly the angels don't understand Aramaic, then how do they they won't take up your prayers to heaven. And then it talks about possibly if you have a minion, then then your prayers don't need the angels to take you up to take them up to heaven, because the minion, the prayers automatically ascend to heaven. And also if someone is not well, you can say prayers in Aramaic, and it'll still work because God is the Shekhinah is by the head of a person who's not well. So the Talmud talks about this idea about the angels not understanding Aramaic, and or not. It either means they don't understand Aramaic, or they don't respect Aramaic, and then it possibly means all languages besides Hebrew. So Aramaic could just be an example, because that was the language that was spoken. So getting back to this discussion, the Zohar, we mentioned the Zohar, that the level of Lech Lecha is Mahaze, is the Aramaic term for vision, and the level of Vayera is as it says Vayera, and that is Hebrew, and that shows a higher level of spiritual revelation, spiritual revelation. Yes, Ben.
Arav, may I say the word that you say Yira, it's spelled out, I think, as Yira-e, with the hey at the end, right?
No, it's this. You're correct in certain places.
Yira-e is exactly the same as Mahaze.
Yeah. It says that some
Yira-e
places.
is another word for Mahaze.
Right. It does say Yera at places, but here we're talking about Vayera. Vayera. Vav Yud Resh Aleph.
Aleph, without the hey.
Right, without a hey.
Yeah.
It means the
But
same thing.
I'm just saying, Yira-e means the same thing as Mahaze.
Yeah. That's what we're saying. It really means the same thing.
Yeah.
It really means the same thing, and that's why it is a little. Yeah. Good point.
Okay.
Ben is mentioning.
Yira is more fear. Isn't
You're right.
fear?
Yes. There is a
Okay.
shoresh. The root word is very close between fear
Right.
and vision. The root word of fear is
Right.
yira, yud resh aleph. The root word for see is ra'ah, resh aleph hey. That's the root word.
Yeah.
So it's a different root. The shoresh, the root is different. Yira is fear is yud resh aleph, but they're very close. They sound similar,
Yeah.
but it's different roots. You know what I mean? It's not the same shoresh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so basically, we've just mentioned the Zohar dividing these two words, these two levels of revelation for Avram. Now, the question is, what is this idea that the angels are jealous or they're going to complain? If Avraham deserves to have a higher level of revelation, then it shouldn't make a difference if the angels are going to complain. Hashem will have to pacify them some other way. But if Avraham deserves something better, he should get it. Why do we take into consideration these angels complaining? So that is one of that. That's a question on this. On this Zohar, and the Lubavitch Rebbe will answer it at the end. Now, the difference between Aramaic and Hebrew is brought down in a sefer called Torah Or, another Hasidic book, and it mentions there that Aramaic and other languages compared to Hebrew, Lashon HaKodesh, is similar to the difference between rocks and bricks. What's the difference between a rock and a brick? So a rock is God-made, and a brick is man-made. And the language of Hebrew, Lashon HaKodesh, would be similar to rocks, because the Hebrew language is a God-made language. The other languages are considered similar to bricks because they are man-made. And what does that mean, man-made? Well, Hebrew was the language that everyone was created with originally, Adam, Harishain, and so on. Adam was created speaking Hebrew. And when they were divided into different languages, the people had to figure out all the different languages. So they decided how to make up words to represent different things. Like, for example, they looked at a table and they said, you know what, let's call this a table so we'll know what we're talking about. So in other words, is the word table connected intrinsically with the piece of wood that has 4 legs on the bottom? No, It's just they chose, people had to develop the other languages to, so they're man-made languages. Lashon HaKodesh is Hashem made. It's God made. Now it's interesting. It doesn't say this here in the essay of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, but it's brought in Tanya that the actual language of Hebrew is so unique because every single letter of the Hebrew alphabet has certain energy. And when you put the letters together that make up a word, all of those are the energies of that item. So for example, in Hebrew, the word even means stone. And those letters, Aleph, Beis, Nun, even, stone, they are the energies that give existence to the stone. So the Hebrew language is intrinsically connected to the item that it's referring to. So not only is it God-made language, but it actually expresses the energy that's in every single item. So for example, a table in Hebrew is called a shulchan, and those letters, shulchan, shin, vav, lamed, ches, nun, are actually the energy that gives existence to the table. So it makes the Hebrew language a very special and unique language. But we're not really discussing that. I just mentioned that on the side. The point that we're bringing from Torah Or is that there's a difference between Lashon HaKodesh, and this doesn't mean modern Hebrew. This means the Holy Tongue Hebrew, the biblical Hebrew, and compared to other languages, including Aramaic. And so the Hebrew language is God-made, similar to rocks, and the other languages are man-made, similar to bricks. And yes.
Isn't Hebrew if Hebrew would by creation is the original language of the world, so didn't other languages emanate from the Hebrew, or is that not so? I mean, you have Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. I mean, those were mandatory languages that people back in the 18th, 19th century had to study in the universities of the day. And then from those languages came a lot of other languages. You hear what I'm saying?
Yeah, but we know that all the languages are man-made except for Hebrew. And if you take it all back, it's from the dispersion of the Dar Haflaga, where all the languages were divided into 70. And if certain languages evolved into other languages, that's just the way people develop them. That itself is also man-made. But the idea is that we generally look at the languages, that there are 70 languages, and they're all man-made languages based on people agreeing to choose certain words to refer to certain things. Just like any new word nowadays that, when they came up with a computer, they had to decide, what should we call this machine? They called it a computer, a calculator. They anything that wasn't around before, a telephone, they had to come up with words for these new items. Wi-Fi. I don't think in previous generations they knew what the word Wi-Fi meant. Even if you explain to them what type of what it's going to do, what Wi-Fi will do, they will not tell you, oh yeah, that's Wi-Fi. They wouldn't have known that. We came up with these are new words that are decided upon by whoever creates something, and people who decide what they want to call it, and that's the term used. So in any event,
Can I ask about Aramaic being man-made? What little Aramaic I've seen is Kol Nidre. Kol is Hebrew, Neder is Hebrew, Shavuot. our oaths are not oaths, our vows are not vows. Aren't those, they do la instead of lo, I noticed that. But the bigger words were, they looked like Hebrew.
So you're right. There's a lot of mixture of Hebrew and Aramaic, but not necessarily is that the real Aramaic. As you know, one of the things you'll see, and I'm not a professor of languages, but there is a difference between the Babylonian Talmud and the Jerusalem Talmud. Like in the Babylonian Talmud, it's Aramaic, but it says Tashema, come and listen. Shema is Hebrew. In the Jerusalem Talmud, it says Tachazi, come and see, but it uses not a Hebrew word, a chazi, like the word we're talking about here, chazi mechaze. It means it's an Aramaic word. So there were different Aramaics that were there were slight variations of the Aramaic language, and some was mixed more with Hebrew. So I'm not sure if the whole Kol Nidre would be considered. It's definitely written in a Aramaic style. In other words, ushvua sana is a Aramaic suffix. It's the end, the way it's presented. But I'm not sure if that would be if that was written in the Jerusalem Talmud area, or like the Zohar as well. It's like a much harder Aramaic. I don't know if there would be different words that they would have chosen. So again, it's hard to say what exact words are real Aramaic and which ones are just a mixture. Okay. Ben. Yes.
Yeah. In modern Hebrew, Kol Nidrei would be Kol Nedarai.
Right. It's definitely the grammar. Yeah, no, definitely the grammar is an Aramaic grammar.
Same letters.
Yeah.
Actually,
Okay,
it's the
Andrea.
same letters.
Right. Andrea. I can't hear you. You're on mute, so unmute yourself. I cannot hear you. Yes.
Okay, here we go. Again, going back to my Sunday school days, which are quite a few moons.
Sound failed.
Somehow we cannot hear you, Andrea. No, now, okay. No.
Now, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Again, the Tower of Babel story.
Yeah.
Back earlier on in our history. How does that relate to different languages?
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
I mentioned, of course, God divided up the nation into different languages, but of course the people had to develop those languages. They were developed by those people that they couldn't understand anything that was being when they were building, so they dispersed, and those languages were considered to have been, I guess, developed by those 70 different individuals who who developed those languages. But they're basically called man-made, and they're similar to bricks. That's the term. But it definitely is an interesting topic to think about and maybe look into, see if there's any midrashic literature about it, of to what extent did Hashem divide up the languages. Something you definitely could do your research and see, because that is a question of did Hashem, if Hashem divided up those languages, he obviously he somehow started those languages out. So to what extent did he make them? Are they why do we call them man-made? But that's the that's the general understanding, that the Hebrew language was God-made, and that's how people were talking, and everything else is considered man-made. And so the service of Avrohom was in the portion of Lech Lecha is obviously going to be connected to this idea of man-made, and somehow the service in Vayera is going to be connected to more God-made. It's going to be the difference between rocks and bricks. Now, the reason why Hashem created all these languages is so that our job is to elevate all these languages and all the languages of the nations of the world we are supposed to use for holiness, and we elevate them. So that's like the purpose of us, even studying in other languages and living in other countries. Why did God exile the Jewish people to different countries? So that we could elevate those languages and use them for holiness and proper things and mitzvahs to serve Hashem. And until the bris of Avrohom was serving Hashem in a way like a brick. What does that mean? Well, Avrohom was doing mitzvahs, but he was doing them as a human, as an individual who was growing in serving Hashem. He was serving Hashem, as an individual wants to serve Hashem, to unite with Hashem, and he was reaching the highest level possible for a creation. In other words, Avrohom was a created being, and he served Hashem to the extent that he reached he was reaching up to the limit possible, which is called the shoresh of nivroim, the source of creations. Our job is to try to reach to our source, meaning to become so holy and so righteous that we are able to reach the highest level possible for each of us, each person. You can't go higher than your source, but you can reach your source. So our original soul was enjoying great spiritual revelations in heaven, and before it came down on earth. Now it got mixed with the body, and our job is to refine the body to the extent that we could go back and reach our source above. So when we do that, we are serving Hashem, or when Avrohom did that, he was serving Hashem in a way of a human trying to reach his source and unite with Hashem, but he couldn't get higher than his source. Now, by doing the circumcision, what happened was circumcision brought Avrohom to be able to reach even higher than he was originally. And what happened when he did the circumcision was he became so united with Hashem, connected to Hashem, that instead of being considered a creation, he's almost like a creator. He is united in a way, so self-effaced, such bittul, in Hebrew would be called bittul, self-nullification, that he became one with Hashem, that he's not really on the level or the typical level of creations. And doing the circumcision, not only did it unite him with Hashem, but it united his physical body to express it. In other words, a person could unite with Hashem in their mind, but then their body unites with Hashem to that extent that they are so nullified to Hashem that they become completely one with Hashem. And that is the idea of the bris that Avrohom did, and he reached this ability to go higher than is really humanly possible. And when we say that Avrohom served Hashem, now reached the level of the stone of Evan, like a stone, meaning God made, that is the idea of the level he reached through his bris milah, through his circumcision, because it's not a level you can attain on your own. It's only a level attainable if God brings you to that level. In other words, he completed his level that's possible for him. And then Hashem said, I'm going to give you a much higher level, and I'm commanding you to do the bris milah, and I'm taking you out of being a individual that wants to serve me, but I'm making you into in a certain sense, higher than someone who has his own interest to serve me. You're much higher than that. You're one with me. You're united with me in a way that transcends someone who wants to serve me. And that is that is why after the bris, Avrohom is on the level of Vayera instead of Mahaze. He's on this level of seeing Hashem and in a much greater way than he was able to see Hashem before, in a way of Mahaze. So what's really the difference between Mahaze and Vayera? So we know there is a statement in the Talmud that says that sometimes when Moses prophesied, he uses the word zeh, this. And sometimes he uses the word koi, which means such. And the Talmud explains that when it uses the word this, it means aspaklaria hameira. That means a lens that shines, that's clear. And when it uses the word koi, which means like such, it means aspaklaria she'ena meira, a lens that's not shining, that's not clear. And what that means is that you're not able to see the essence. It's like covered over. It's almost like seeing through a cloth, so a shade. You're seeing through it, but it's sort of black. You're not able to see. You're seeing indirectly. And the example of zeh is that you point at something when it's in front of you. That's what it means to prophesize with the word zeh, which means Moses actually saw the highest level revelations possible to mankind, because he uses the word zeh when he prophesizes. This is what God said, and he, so to speak, saw the vision of God in front of him when God revealed whatever he was revealing to him in his prophecies. Moses could point to it, and when other prophets, had visions from Hashem, they couldn't point to it. They understood this is what God was saying. In a certain sense, similar to Aramaic versus Hebrew, that Hebrew would be a direct language, and Aramaic is the way Hebrew is translated into Aramaic. It's like an indirect level. And that is the meaning of, before Avrohom's circumcision, he was able to have a revelation in the level of Aramaic, in the level of the brick, and the level of aspaklaria she'ena meira, a lens that's not clear, or something's covering it over, and he doesn't see the essence. But after he had his circumcision, he was able to see a much greater vision, much closer, similar to Moses. At least from Moses, we can understand that it was something, something along that path. And that's the idea of Vayera, that nothing, it wasn't blocked, like it wasn't concealed, like it was in Lech Lecha. Now, how could he reach this level? Because through refining himself, doing mitzvahs, with having an evil inclination, going down to Egypt and living in times of exile and suffering, all of these things are reasons why Hashem allows us to reach great heights, while the angels are, in a certain sense, jealous of us, because we have all these we have these physical challenges, limitations, materialistic obstacles, and the angels, they have a nullification to Hashem, but they can't reach higher than their level. Humans are able, we are able, not on our own to reach higher than our level, but through connecting to Hashem, Hashem will give us that gift to reach beyond our abilities and to a level that transcends creations. And that is the uniqueness of the portion of Vayera, and that's why it's divided, of course, into two. Now, when the Zohar says that the angels are going to complain, what the Zohar means is that if Avrohom would have been able to have these revelations, the angels would have complained without having the circumcision, without having this unique connection to Hashem, this attachment to Hashem, this self-nullification to Hashem that's of the highest level. Without having that and being able to have revelations, the angels, it says, would have complained. And therefore Hashem had to just give him a vision of Mahaze, like Aramaic vision, a vision of indirect vision. And what that means is that the fact that the angels would have complained, it's not because their complaints are a problem, it's that they're right. How could Avrohom deserve to get higher than his source? The fact that they're complaining, is a proof that he's not fit for it. He's not able to. A person can't. Their complaint is a valid complaint. It's not that it's wrong. It's actually correct. How could Avrohom deserve to reach such a level that's beyond his ability, beyond the source, beyond his source? And this is where, when he had the circumcision, then he's no longer in that league. He's in a whole different league. After he was circumcised, now he is attached to Hashem in such a level that that he can reach, he can go beyond his limitations because he's now connected. Hashem is elevating him, so to speak, to a much higher level than he could have reached. And that's the portion of Vayera. So now, if we look at the names of the Torah portions, we see how Lech Lecha means go to yourself. It means he was still a person. He was still an individual. Look at the word Lech Lecha, go to yourself. He is a you. He is a somebody. And Vayera is where Hashem appears to him after he had his circumcision, and he's above the level of being a regular creation, and he's able to see godliness because he had this circumcision, and he reached a level that he was able to transcend the norm of humanity. Now, what is the lesson for us from this? What can we learn from this? So, just like Avrohom, until his circumcision, he didn't reach completion, but then he was able to be given from above a revelation of Vayera. We should not be satisfied with our situation until we reach these high levels. We should try to reach the level of Avrohom. And even if we have a vision of Hashem, we should realize we might be having the vision of Lech Lecha and not the vision of Vayera. In other words, we should never be satisfied. In other words, the more righteousness we do, the more righteous we are, and the more we connect to Hashem in a way of self-effacement and loving Hashem and uniting with Hashem and going beyond ourselves. Even if we reach a level of vision of Hashem, we should know there's higher levels of vision. And And if we serve Hashem with completeness, Hashem will give us the level of Avrohom, aspaklaria hameira, to be able to see Hashem in a way, or serve Hashem and see Hashem in a way that we can have a clearer vision. And ultimately, of course, we will have that when Mashiach comes. So when Mashiach comes, of course, we will, Mitzvah Hashem, merit to have the real revelation of Vayera, Elav Hashem, that Hashem will appear to us. And as it says, Mare be'etzba'oi v'oimar zeh, that we'll see Hashem and we'll be able to point to Hashem and say, Zeh, this is Hashem. That we'll have such a clear vision, we should be able to merit that. So that's the idea, that's the message of this. So this is a very unique essay from the Lubavitch Rebbe, Sicha from the Rebbe, about connecting the difference between these two portions and seeing the difference between Avroham's service to Hashem before his circumcision and after, and how important it is to connect to Hashem on a high level, and what potential we have. Each and every one of us have huge potential, and that potential comes because we have challenges. Because of our challenges, it puts us in a whole different league than the angels. The angels aren't able to reach these levels. We are, because we are able to go and travel. And Avrohom traveled in Lech Lecha. He traveled in a systematic way up to Hashem. But then Hashem, after he had his circumcision, he was able to reach a level where he never could have reached on his own.